Hey, this is Kirk from Go Make Music and We Dream of Eden, and today I want to show you how you can take just 2 or 3 simple chords and with a little bit of music theory, a little bit of arrangement, turn it into something emotional and beautiful. So let's dive in. I want to take you into one of my tracks called Your Breath, which is from my Flickering Light EP, and it's been out for a while. You can listen to it, but we're going to dive into some parts of it that I think will be helpful to you. We got a sub, we got some pads, we got some strings and some swells. But the first thing I wanted you to notice is up here that the tempo is 55 beats per minute. And I always like doing these meditative type songs around this tempo. I've just always liked the feel of that, whether it's 55 beats per minute 4/4 time or 55 beats per minute 6/4 time, or sometimes 60 beats per minute, 65. I'll go up to 70. Sometimes I'll do something at 120, but then I'm basically doing it in 60 because it's halftime. And I just always like the feel of that. Well, last year, I think it was, I ended up reading this book called Breath by James Nestor, I think it is. And he was talking about meditation, breathing, the health benefits, I think it's called The Lost Art, The New Science of a Lost Art. Anyways, they broke it down to this place where a great breath for calming yourself, getting into that parasympathetic rest and digest place is about 6 seconds inhale, 6 seconds exhale. 5.5, 6 seconds, a little more than 6 seconds. So, which is basically that range, that 55 beats per minute. And so I'm like, oh man, this really relates to what I feel when I'm doing this music. So it was a really cool connection. And then this idea of your breath ties into that because it's kind of like, it's this idea that breath is life, breath is spirit, breath is wind. And when we engage with our own breath, we are engaging with this breath that is the life force of all creation. And so I like to think about that when I'm approaching this type of music. And it's just so happens that as these chords change in this tempo, it does something. It resonates with me. It calms me as I'm actually writing the music. And so it's just something to think about. Again, there's not rules, but it's just amazing how the rhythms of our bodies connect to the rhythms of music and how they affect one another. So again, not everything has to be 55 or 60 or whatever. You can play with what you want to play with, but pay attention to those things because they can affect the mood that you might be trying to create in your music. So that's one thing. Tempo. All right. The other thing is more music theory. Let's get into like chord voicings. So we have this simple chord progression. I'll play it on a piano, and please excuse my janky camera setup, but I hope it helps. We have an E chord that goes to a C sharp minor chord, then back to the E chord, and then down to the B major chord. And in theory world, that would be, if we're in the key of E, which we are, it's the 1, and then it's 6, going down to the relative minor, and back up to the E. That's the 1 again. And then it jumps down to the 5th. So we have our scale, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1. So the C sharp is the 6, B is the 5. But instead of going up to the 5 or up to the 6, I'm actually going down to the 6 and then down to the 5. We have these 3 chords, essentially. E, C sharp, minor, E major, B. Now, I could play that over and over again, and eventually it could get boring. So how do I make that interesting? So instead of just playing these chords with a string patch or a synth patch or a piano thing, I take the idea of those notes, of those chords, and I give them each to a different instrument. So it's almost like a choir or an orchestra, to where, a violin can only play one note at a time, and a oboe can only play one at a time, and a synth bass should only play one note at a time. So I'm taking this chord and I'm breaking it out. So, for example, this bass right here is doing the foundation notes. So it's doing the one of each chord. So the E, the C sharp, the E again, and then the B. So it sounds like this. So there's the one, and it's going for a long time because it's, ambient music. By itself, it's nothing special, but there's a swell to it. It comes in, comes back down. Show you the mod. It's the modulation of the mod wheel swelling the note, right? So I have that. Let me turn that off for a second. So then I add, on top of that, I go an octave above this note, the E. So here, I'm going to play it on my piano. See if I can see it. So I got my E down here. That's the sub bass. And then an octave above that would be here. But instead of playing an octave above it, I go up here to the third. So I'm playing the root and the third, which is what's called a tenth. So it's 7 plus 3. There's your tenth, which is an octave up and then another third. That sounds like this. This is a dark pad with the sub. Just adds that little essence to it on top. Very subtle, but it starts to give some information about what key we're in, what chord this is. And then this guy comes in. He's the Bonitas pad. It's kind of got a choir feel. And this is where I'm going to add the fifth of the chord with another instrument. So we got the sub playing the root. We got the synth playing the third. And then we have this other pad choir-like thing doing the fifth above that. So we're going here, and then we're going to move down. And each of these sounds is unique to itself, and each is swelling in uniquely to itself. So it has more of a choir orchestra feel than just blocking out some chords. Let's hear what that sounds like. So already we're getting some interest. And this is just a straight 3-note triad. It's nothing crazy music theory-wise. But let's add one more element. Let's reinforce the third with this string. So this is essentially a frozen string from Spitfire, I believe, with some processing on it. But this reinforces the third of the chord, which then really makes the key strong. Let's look at it all together, actually. So just 2 triads. Come back to the E. And now we're going to move to the B. So there you go. That's just 3 notes, a triad, moving in parallel motion, meaning when one goes down, the others go down. Everything's going up and down. You can make voices move in other directions, but for this, them going in the same direction feels good and it feels nice. And that gives me the basis of my chord progression. And then from there, you can add other elements, like reverse textures, that are moving around in the key of the song. So once you've established your basic chord voicing for a chord progression, whether it's 2 chords, 3 chords, 4 chords, you now have this living, breathing, singing choir at your disposal, and then you can add other elements like melodies or textures or reverse textures or whatever you want, and it feels way more inspiring to write to. So my exercise for you is to just pick a chord progression, split it out into 3 or 4 instruments, and spread it out to where the notes aren't next to each other like a block chord. You don't want everything close together for this experiment, especially if you're down here, because it's going to get muddy. You're going to take that third and move it up an octave. It already opens up. You could take the 5th and put it up an octave. You could put the 5th up an octave and then put the 3rd on top of that. And then do... So that sounds different than this. It's all the same 3 notes. And experiment with giving each of those notes its own instrument. There you go. So I hope that was helpful. If you have any other questions about music theory for ambient music or music in general, let me know in the comments, and I'd love to make some more videos about that. Also, I have some free sounds that you can grab for making ambient music. There's a video where I walk you through all of them. And I made an entire class where I teach you how to produce and promote your own ambient music. You can check out the trailer for that here. And I hope you have an amazing day and go make some music.